Nancy Guthrie's ransom notes have now been released in full, nearly 6 months after the 84-year-old mother of Today co-anchor Savannah Guthrie disappeared from her Arizona home. One message demanded millions of dollars for her return. A second writer claimed Nancy died shortly after she was taken, but that claim has not been confirmed by investigators. No remains have been recovered publicly, and the FBI still lists Nancy as a missing person. The central question is now more complicated than what the messages say. Why did authorities decide to release them after their credibility had previously been questioned? For verified entertainment updates without the rumors, subscribe to Startline Entertainment. On July 31st, the Pima County Sheriff's Department published redacted copies of 2 messages that had been sent to Tucson news outlets during the first week of the investigation. Authorities said they hope someone familiar with the writer will recognize recurring language, sentence construction, or patterns of expression. Investigators also asked people to consider whether someone they know experienced an unexplained change in appearance, routine, mood, or behavior around the time Nancy disappeared. That appeal is important because the public release is not being presented as proof that every statement in the notes is true. It is an effort to identify their author. The person who wrote them may know what happened, may have been involved, or may have attempted to exploit a highly publicized disappearance. Publicly available statements do not settle which possibility is correct. The first message arrived on February 2nd, one day after Nancy was reported missing. It was addressed to Savannah and claimed Nancy was alive but frightened. The writer demanded $4 million in Bitcoin by February 5th, threatened to raise the amount to $6 million if that deadline passed, and set a final deadline of February 9th. The note said Nancy would be released after payment and threatened that she would be killed if the demand remained unmet. The writer also included details that appeared designed to establish access to Nancy's home. Those details referred to a white smartwatch near the foot of her bed and damage to a floodlight in the backyard. Authorities redacted another portion before releasing the message publicly. Investigators have not disclosed enough information to determine whether the household details could have been known only by the person responsible for Nancy's disappearance. 4 days later, on February 6th, a second message was sent to the Tucson television station. This one was addressed to the Guthrie family and did not make another payment demand. The writer claimed Nancy had died shortly after being taken, suggested the death was connected to her heart condition, and said she had been buried in nature. The message ended with an expression of regret. Those are allegations made by the writer, not findings by police, medical examiners, or a court. That distinction is the most important fact in this update. Authorities have not confirmed that Nancy is dead, have not announced the recovery of her body, and have not identified a suspect responsible for taking her. The FBI's current public notice continues to seek information leading to Nancy's location and describes the case as an active kidnapping and missing person investigation. To understand why the new release matters, the timeline has to return to the night Nancy vanished. Nancy was last seen by her family on the evening of January 31st after spending time at the Tucson home of her daughter Annie and son-in-law. Investigators believe she was taken from her Catalina Foothills residence during the early hours of February 1st. Surveillance footage captured a masked person approaching the house, and the doorbell camera disconnected at approximately 1:47 that morning. Information later reviewed by investigators indicated that the app connected to Nancy's pacemaker lost contact with her phone line roughly half an hour later. Later that morning, Nancy failed to appear for a planned church gathering. Relatives went to check on her and found that she was gone. Essential belongings, including her phone, wallet, hearing aids, and daily medication, had been left behind. Those details, along with conditions at the property, led authorities to conclude that she had not simply left voluntarily. Blood was discovered outside the home near the front entrance. DNA testing later confirmed that it belonged to Nancy. Officials have not publicly described the extent of any injury, and the presence of blood does not by itself establish whether she died. It does, however, form part of the evidence supporting the conclusion that she was taken against her will. Nancy was considered especially vulnerable. The FBI says she had difficulty walking, used a pacemaker, and required daily medication for a heart condition. That established medical information may explain why the second note's writer referred to her physical condition, but it does not verify the writer's version of events or establish a medical cause of death. No authorized medical finding has been released. The first ransom message arrived while investigators were still processing the crime scene and searching the surrounding area. Savannah, Her sister Annie and their brother Cameron publicly acknowledged the reports and asked whoever had Nancy to establish a verifiable channel of communication. When the first payment deadline passed, the family continued pleading for her safe return. After the second message arrived, the family responded publicly again. Savannah indicated that the family had received the communication and pleaded for the return or recovery of their mother. That response should not be interpreted as an official determination that the note was genuine. Families in an active kidnapping investigation may respond cautiously to communications because the consequences of ignoring a potentially authentic message could be irreversible. On February 10th, the FBI and the Sheriff's Department released images and video of the person seen outside Nancy's home. The individual appeared to be armed and wore a mask, gloves, and a black backpack. The FBI describes the person as a male approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build, and says the backpack resembled a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. Investigators believe identifying this person could lead them to Nancy. That footage remains one of the case's most significant public clues. It shows someone interfering with the front door camera around the period investigators believe Nancy was taken. It does not publicly establish that the person wrote either note, and authorities have not announced a forensic connection between the footage and the messages. There have also been leads that initially appeared promising but produced no identified suspect. Investigators recovered gloves approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, but DNA testing eventually traced them to a local restaurant employee who was not considered a suspect. Hair recovered from Nancy's residence also did not lead investigators to a suspect. A mixed DNA sample from the home has continued to receive attention, but no public identification has resulted from it. Then came a major complication involving the ransom notes themselves. At the beginning of July, Reuters reported that an FBI official said the February 2nd and February 6th messages had been assessed as not credible and were believed to have come from the same sender. The FBI's public statement was broader. It said some communications received during the investigation were illegitimate extortion attempts, while other ransom demands remained under investigation as potentially legitimate. The Bureau emphasized that it continued to treat Nancy's disappearance as a kidnapping for ransom case. That earlier assessment creates an unresolved question around the July 31st release. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has now presented the two messages as communications whose linguistic patterns might help identify a person connected to the case. However, the department's public release did not clearly explain whether the FBI had reversed its reported credibility assessment, whether local investigators disagreed with that assessment, or whether the messages are considered valuable even if their factual claims are unreliable. Those possibilities are not interchangeable. A false ransom demand can still be criminal and can still reveal information about someone attempting to interfere with an investigation. A message can also contain some accurate details while making false claims, and a writer could possess knowledge of the crime without personally carrying out every act described. Until investigators clarify the evidentiary status of these notes, the safest conclusion is that identifying their author could be useful, but the messages cannot independently confirm Nancy's fate. The timing of the release may also reflect the investigation's lack of a public breakthrough. 6 months after Nancy disappeared, no suspect has been arrested, and her location remains unknown. The Sheriff's Department says detectives continue pursuing technological and investigative leads, while the FBI's public missing person page remains active. The family has continued trying to create new opportunities for someone to come forward. The FBI is offering up to $100,000 for information leading to hair recovery. Just 4 days before the notes were released, Savannah posted another direct appeal. She asked whoever knows what happened to make the right choice and tell us where to look for her. The message appeared carefully worded to leave open the possibility of Nancy's return or recovery while avoiding an unsupported declaration about whether she is alive. That wording reflects the painful uncertainty at the center of this case. The first note claimed Nancy was alive and could be released. The second claimed she had already died. The FBI's earlier reported assessment cast doubt on both messages. The Sheriff's Department now believes their language may help identify the writer, and yet the core facts remain unchanged. Nancy is still missing. The person in the surveillance footage has not been publicly identified, and there has been no official confirmation of her death. The public should also avoid trying to identify someone solely from writing style. appearance changes, or social media speculation. The sheriff's department is asking people with genuine knowledge to contact investigators, not to accuse individuals online. A phrase that seems familiar is not proof, and an incorrect public accusation could harm an innocent person or interfere with the investigation. Here is the start line takeaway. What changed on July 31st was not Nancy Guthrie's official status. What changed was the amount of information authorities were willing to place in front of the public. For the first time, people can examine the messages in their broader form and consider whether the writer's language resembles someone they know. What viewers should not assume is that the second note proves Nancy died from a heart-related event. There is no publicly confirmed medical conclusion, no recovered remains, and no official declaration of death in the sources reviewed for this report. The writer's claim remains exactly that, a claim. The detail to watch next is whether the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department clarifies the note's credibility status. Another major development would be the identification of the person seen outside Nancy's home, a forensic match from the remaining evidence or information leading investigators to her location. As of the latest available update, Nancy Guthrie remains missing, the investigation remains active, and the public is being asked to focus on verifiable information. Anyone with relevant knowledge can contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The messages have finally been released. But the answer Nancy's family has sought since February, the answer to where she is, remains outside the public record.